What's going on, YouTubers, gamers and fellow hobbyists, and welcome to another episode of Hobby 121. Now in this episode I'm going to be talking a little bit about scale and setting. So what scale do you want to get into, what setting do you want to get into, and more importantly, how do you know not to mix and match your bits of terrain with your models and not get mixed up? Because when I first started, I do remember I had a few models of one particular model range and some scenery from another, and the scales were clearly different. Now, how do you determine the scale? Well, that's easy. Now, all models or sets of models, particularly, it's mostly on the boxes you will notice it, but they'll have some numbers on the side. It'll be like 128 and things like that. Now, what does this all mean? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run through some of the more common scales for wargaming. Okay, so this is some of the numbers you will see. Now, 6mm or 1/300, and you may see I don't know, 1298 or 1301 or whatever. That is the actual scale of 6mm. So models that are in 6mm scale are very small and are used for more epic scale battles, more grandiose scales, larger battlefields, and or someone with limited space. Perhaps you don't have that much space. It all depends on what era of wargaming you're going to get into, but we'll come on to that on the kind of like the second part of the video, if you will. So 6mm is the one of the more common scales you will see, particularly in historical wargaming. 15mm is another popular scale. I've seen a lot of American Civil War and sci-fi models with this particular scale, and a lot of people I know play the black powder rules using 15mm rather than 28, because if you want to have a good game of black powder, it does require like an 8x4 foot table, ideally, if not more. And with the 28mm models, it's just a little bit too big. It takes up too much room. So a lot of people use 15mm and just transfer the inches in the game to centimeters, and that seems to work fairly fine. Okay, 20mm. Now this is quite popular in a lot of historical gaming. That's just from what I've seen on the internet, but it's 20mm or 180.5 if you want to be exact. Now, a lot of people also I know play in 176 scale, which I think a lot of FX models are, and they're about 20mm. They're not quite, they're just a little bit small, and for some people that's fine. It accommodates different builds in stature and heights and that, and it makes for a more diverse army, I suppose, depending on what setting you are playing. But again, if you want to be consistent, stick with the one and only that you begin with, unless you change your mind, of course. Now, 25mm or 1/64 scale is a very, very common scale of figure. An awful lot of settings use 25mm scale, and indeed I think 25 was one of the early modern scales. I mean, the others have been around, but there was also a thing called hero scale, which I'll come on to in a minute, and that links to 25mm. But 25 and 28 are very, very similar, but not quite. It depends on the manufacturer as well, as you will probably see if you go to places like conventions and things where there's a lot of different figure manufacturers selling their goods, and you can see differences in scale. What is 25 on one is the same as 28 on another. This brings me nicely on to 28mm, which an awful lot of companies use, particularly Games Workshop at the moment. I mean, they used to have a 6mm scale years and years ago called Epic Scale, which was 6mm. But all their models now in their Warhammer range are 28mm. I'm not so sure about the Lord of the Rings. Now, this is where we come to hero scale, because Games Workshop uses the hero scale. A lot of companies do. And now I've read some people say hero scale on 25mm is 28mm. But Games Workshop use 28mm hero scale, and it's basically almost like a caricature. Limbs are slightly bigger, hands are slightly bigger. Just makes it, I don't know, easier for the eye to see, I suppose. But yeah, it's got a more theatrical feel to it. But 28mm is hugely popular in a lot of scales, but it does depend whether it's 28mm true scale, which is just normal 28mm, or 28mm hero scale. And you will see vastly the difference in hero scale and true scale if you take two 28mm figures, like, I don't know, say a bolt action infantry guy. He'll be 28mm true scale, and then like an Imperial Guard from Warhammer 40,000. He's 28mm, but he's in a hero scale, so his hands will be slightly bigger and things like that, and you'll notice that. But that's 1/58 28mm. Now, some companies use 32mm scale, or 1/48. Now, if you go, sometimes 1/48 scale is the closest I've found. 1/48 does actually work out to be 33.5 if you want to be precise about it. But it is minimal because it's getting bigger now, so the difference is getting less and less noticeable. Now, 32mm figures are used a lot in skirmish type games, and they're slightly bigger, so they can get away with true scale and be almost the same as the Games Workshop 28mm hero scale. But if you get 32mm hero scale, I mean, it allows for so much more detail on a model, and they're great for dioramas and things as well. Okay, now we're into the big boys now, the 54mm or 1/130 scale. This is the traditional toy soldier scale, and it's very big. It died out pretty much, but it is actually, according to my sources, it's beginning to make a bit of a comeback now. So it depends what type of thing you want to do, really, and how much room you've got. So there we go, hero scale, last item, which I've already talked about, but as far as I know, it only applies to 25, 28 and 32mm figures, but that might be wrong. That I don't know that for certain, but that is what I do know. This is just some of the more common scales. There are literally hundreds out there, but if you look on the numbers on the box, the smaller the scale of the miniature, the larger the second number will appear after the 1. That should be easy enough to work out the scale of, like, say 1 inch equals 300 inches in real life. Obviously a 1-to-1 scale is life size, so if you get bigger, then it has the opposite effect. So yeah, that's probably some of the more common ones you'll come across anyway. So let's have a look at a couple of examples here. Okay, this is one of my 15mm American Civil War figures. I was going to get into American Civil War at one stage, and I still am going to. It's just I've put it on the back burner for now, but that's another story. And it's unfinished painting. I haven't finished painting it, so but it'll give you a little bit of a comparison. So that's 15mm, and that's a 28mm hero scale, I believe. 28mm next to a 15mm model. Okay, this is a 32mm model from War Machine. So one on the right, he is fully painted. But yeah, so you can kind of see how the bigger the scale gets, the less noticeable the subtle differences are, but the more detail you can pack into the actual miniature. So just lining them all up there in a kind of a rank and file there. You can see the kind of epicness of it, and the further back you go, just imagine more and more and more, or even half size, like 6mm. It would look really good coming back. And there's a really poor quality picture. I'm sorry about that. I had a few issues with that one, but just to give you an idea of size, that's my hand over the 28mm model, so that'll give you some kind of idea. The other side of modelling, well, another side of modelling is railway, and there are three more common scales, and the first one that you may come across is N, if you're going to go into model railway. N is kind of a very small scale, like the smallest of the three main ones. 00, which is, from what I can gather, the most commonly used scale in model railway. This is the equivalent of around about 1/76 scale or 20mm in the like the wargaming side of things. And the last one I want to touch on is 0. It's weird how it works. N 0, 0, 0, and there's loads more as well. Depends what size you have as to what tracks you use. But I'm really not much of an expert on model railway. In fact, I'm nowhere near even an amateur scale. But there are many great videos out on YouTube on the subject, and there's also many great websites which will tell you the scale of model railways and what to go for. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about scale. Now let's have a look at setting. And you probably already know in your heart of hearts what you would like to get into setting wise, or perhaps what particular period in history of wargaming, or perhaps you want to get into like sci-fi or fantasy. But let's just take a look at a couple of them. So this is Black Powder. This is a fine set of rules covering warfare from 1700 to 1900, and this is one which is absolutely excellent for American Civil War, for example. But Black Powder, that kind of era, it's one of the first ones outside of Warhammer that I got into. I do like it. I'm not going to go into too much detail here because that'll just take forever to do in a video of this nature. But yeah, Black Powder, I definitely recommend it. If you do like Black Powder, then you will like Hail Caesar, which is basically Black Powder rules set at a bit of an earlier time period, and it's perfect for Romans, absolutely perfect. If you're into Romans, then Hail Caesar is the one, really, and it's the one I will be going for when I eventually do get into Romans. I've read through the book, and it's pretty sound, so yeah, that's another one. So of course, I have to mention Warhammer 40,000 because that is like my penultimate sci-fi game. But of course there are others. There's loads and loads of others out there. You can spend your whole rest of your hobby lifetime discovering new and wonderful rule sets and games to choose from. But that's my current edition of the Warhammer rules. Another one which is quite good is Beyond the Gates of Antares. That's another excellent sci-fi setting. I love the setting. I absolutely love the setting. I'm not overly enamored with the rules for me. I've just got one of those niggly niggly issues with it in terms of shooting, but that's a personal matter. It's easy. It's easier than Warhammer. And it's like I say, the setting is absolutely fantastic. So to get my fantasy kick, I go to Warhammer Age of Sigmar. I was always going to delve into the old Warhammer fantasy, but I've got the Age of Sigmar to look forward to, and I've had it for quite some time now, but I've just not pursued it, and that's purely out of time because I'm enjoying the other stuff so much. But like I say, it's all personal choice. Ronin is my go-to samurai rule set because I love that. This is probably one of the more easier wargaming skirmish rule sets I've come across. And it's got a really cool game mechanic, particularly with the combat. Absolutely love it. But like I say, there are hundreds and hundreds of different settings out there. You've just got to choose your own and yeah, enjoy.
I think that there are rules for literally any type of setting you can think of out there, so just like I say, have one or two in mind and pursue that, and look at the scales. Like I said, just remember to keep your terrain in line with the same scale as the figures of whatever game you wish to play, or dioramas you wish to make, whatever, you understand. But yeah, and that's brings me to the end of another Hobby 1-to-1. So thank you very much for watching this video on scale and setting. I hope it's been of some use to somebody, and yeah, so remember, all brushes lead to all, and bye for now, folks. Bye bye. So thank you once again for watching this video. If you fancy supporting me, go and check out my Patreon page and click on the link which has either appeared or will appear, or even on the link in the video description below. I thank you for your support. Please like, share, subscribe, and thank you once again. Bye for now.